Welcome back, fellow story lovers. Chapter 5. On Monday morning, Marnie shut her gate and stepped out onto the sighingly silent, empty streets and gasped in the deliciously clean air. She strolled along the familiar road, nodding her chin at the odd neighbour as they passed at a distance, and recalled how, on the same journey 10 years ago, it was the squealing alarms of ambulances that filled the air. The morbid music from funerals and sirens reminded them all of their mortality. Marnie knew herself to be mostly a damaged, scared human being, but today she sensed she had become braver and wanted to confront the youth who thought it was acceptable to break into her home. She crossed over from the faded grandeur into the street of smaller working-class terraces, hoping to catch the lookout sitting on the doorstep after working nights in the dens of death. The street, once sterilised with chemicals, had degraded back to its pre-virus state of stagnant, rubbish-filled dereliction. She felt pity for the few remaining inhabitants of the devastated communities, still living in shock and struggling to find work and food. There were never any convincing explanations for what had occurred, and even the government was in a state of denial until the Prime Minister gasped his last breath. The unseen was a hazard that nobody could have envisaged. As she approached in her mind, she saw the Watcher's face desperately thin, dark, menacing. His eyes had a fragile but clever glimmer, and for a fraction, she wondered if he was to blame for hacking her system, or if there were some other explanations. There was nobody else she could fit into the frame, as her diamond was kept hidden beneath her clothes, and he'd been the only one to see her treasure. The door was open, and as expected, the house was empty. A cat ran out of the gloomy shell, dropped a murdered rat on the ground, and hissed a warning. Marnie shuddered and jumped out of its way, always alert to nature once more, coughing its diseases in her direction. As a child, she was told the virus had mutated from wild animals to humans, who then passed it to their domestic pets, mostly felines, triggering the vicious cycle to start again. As she grew up, new theories were whispered amongst subversive groups. It was Conran's study day, but he'd arranged to meet her for lunch. All morning, her thoughts had strayed towards the youth she now saw in a new light. She struggled to suppress the tingling of excitement as she imagined them, both sitting together, close in the soothingly warm, sweet afternoon. By midday, Marnie was sitting outside the crowded cafe, a rare indulgence. Soon she saw Conran sauntering towards her, his eyes radiant with excitement, a smile spreading beneath the mask that covered his mouth and nose. Immediately he went up to her, bent low, wrapped his arms around her, pulled the covering to beneath his chin and kissed her cheeks. Marnie was flustered, flushed with the surprise of the physical gesture. He plonked his tall frame onto the small chair and gazed at her adoringly. "It's wonderful to see you again," he beamed. "I hope you had fun the other night." Marnie stared into Conran's captivating eyes as a thrill shook her to the depths, and she felt the stirring of embryonic love. "Yes, I had a great time," was all she could manage as potential topics of conversation stacked up in her mind, but they struggled to reach her lips. "I don't go out much." "I suppose it was a little overwhelming. We're all young, you're young, remember that." "You have a right to live," he said, emphasizing his words with an intense gaze. "We have a desire to restore some chaos to our lives, to make our own rules and create our form of right away from the government's all-seeing eyes and new wrong." Conran's hand reached for hers across the table, the dryness of his. Fingers wrapping around hers reminded her of the bleeding, inflamed hands of care workers and medical staff. "They're all good people, intelligent and caring. I hope you will trust me and join me on this new journey." Again, Marnie's emotions were ignited by his touch and smile. "I would love to, but it's hard to let go. I've spent most of my student and working life preparing and searching for the causes of the world's most significant, yet microscopic barbarians. When I see the soil or any wildlife, I wonder what is lying dormant, waiting to strike. I can't look at a bat without seeing death. These microscopic monsters have grown to huge proportions in your mind," he said, regarding her with concern. "As a group, we aim to shrink these embedded fears. To live on the edge, not to live in limbo, waiting to be inundated again," he said with passion. It's your job, I understand, but while dread dominates, it stops you from living. We all have residual fears, but we try to confront them and bring them out into the light. I suppose I hang on to these things because I feel guilty, she said fretfully, searching his eyes to see if he would take her seriously. While the gods scythed down much of the human population, I stayed healthy, not even a sniffle. I've hardly been sick my whole life. I'm so ashamed I haven't mentioned it to anyone. So that is why you continue to torture yourself, he said sympathetically. I saw many friends and family die, but when it came my way, I also only suffered mild symptoms. It was the same for most children. My mother Ida said she'd been riding high before the sickness, happily married to a wealthy man of a high standing in the community. When the disease struck, it seemed surreal, had nothing to do with her and was beyond any human's understanding. Marnie swallowed back the tears welling in her eyes. She remained in denial and flouted the restrictions for too long. Then it crept closer, and the people she cared about died. After this, it sank in, and the sadness and bouts of crying came. Then I had to watch her shrink as, one by one, the flames went out around the world, leaving only ghosts. In the end, she gave up and waited for it to come and engulf her. Marnie held her mug to her lips, ignoring the tears that rested on her high cheekbones. She breathed in the aroma of coffee and, glancing up, saw a crowd of crows circling. They sensed death, she mused. Someone here must be sick. She pushed the thought away and flicked the irritating water with the tip of a bitten nail as her cupid bow lips twisted into a smile. I mustn't seem miserable and morbid all the time. It was the same pattern for me, but it was years ago now, and everything's been good since. Conran talked about how he and his friends planned to travel during the summer holidays and about the adventures they'd already survived. As an introvert, Marnie loved the easy flow of his stories and his relaxed manner. He seemed so much younger than her, but they were both 25. In his presence, the shifting ground became solid, and the gentle stirring of death stilled. Conran paused as if he was waiting for her to speak, and she was compelled to fill the gap. Not much happens to me, but something strange occurred over the weekend, which has concerned me. Marnie explained how she'd come upon a sweatshop in the early hours of the morning, and how the lookout had tried to detain her and engage her in conversation. A little tired and hungover, I went to bed, but suddenly awoke to someone talking directly at me through my security system, threatening me. What did they say? Conran asked with renewed interest. When I was a child, I found a necklace while playing, and they said it belonged to them and wanted it back, she whispered, as her mind delved into past memories. If it's true, I can't return it because I don't know where they live now. I found it in an abandoned house, but the true owners probably don't live there. Most of the junkyard tenants, the asymptomatic spreaders, live in a shanty town on the periphery. These rubbish dumps lie between the borders of one town and another, Conran said in a matter-of-fact tone. I would steer clear. They're villains, mostly addicts, gangs, and those with the corrupt genomes. Conran glanced down at his watch. Time goes so quickly. I've got to go. I'll message you and we'll get together soon. Conran rose, pushing his chair back. He drew close to Marnie, and this time she stood to meet his embrace, holding herself less stiffly. They hugged, rocking, slightly lost in the heat of first love. I'm sorry, I have a paper to write, he said reluctantly. Then he strolled away. Change your security system, and remember you don't have to obey every order, he called back. He flashed her a smile, increased his pace, and disappeared. Marnie was alone again. Love sickness and longing flowed through her body until it ached, and cold shadows crossed into her warm, light dreams. She cast her eyes to the sky and saw that the circling crows had moved off in Conran's direction. Thank you for listening to my story, chapter by chapter. All your support is greatly appreciated. You may find my books in all your favourite online stores under EMG Wixley and on Audible.